What up, everybody, and welcome to Baz on Blades. My name is Baz. This channel is dedicated to blades, and the blade we're going to talk about today is the Boker Kalashnikov automatic. I'm going to preface this video. If I have a really strong opinion on a knife, I like to get that out up front. So it doesn't seem like a biased review. I don't want this to seem like a biased review, whether I like a knife or I don't like a knife personally. So if I have a sort of an overwhelming opinion on a knife, I want to get it out if I can at first. And my opinion on this knife is, from what I have seen, and there's a lot that I have not personally handled and used, this line of knives is probably overall the best value in a low-cost side opening automatic. They are an import model under the Boker Plus brand name, but I have been impressed with this side opening automatic more than any other inexpensive automatic that I have ever owned, used, handled. So you'll see a lot of that through this review. Now, Boker Plus Kalashnikov automatic knife, a side opening automatic. This is a full-size version. There is also a mini version that is quite a bit smaller. It's in a 2.5-inch blade, less than 6 inches overall. The size on this, you've got a 3 3/8 inch blade length, or 8.5 centimeters. The blade stock thickness is 118 thousandths of an inch, or 3 millimeters. The blade width, 1 inch, or 25 millimeters. The handle length, 4 1/4 inches, or 10.5 centimeters. The handle thickness, and I'm going to run through a few numbers here, guys. The handle thickness in between these ridges is 526 thousandths. You take the ridges, that's 661 thousandths. In metric, you're at 13.36 and then 16.79. So these ridges that you see are about 1.5 millimeters per side for additional 3 millimeters overall, and you can see that right here. Big enough to be useful, but not so big to be intrusive or uncomfortable. All right, the handle width at the widest is 1.2 inches, and then these finger choils, this first choil is a little deeper. You're at 1.09 inches wide there, and then on the average on the others is 957 thousandths wide. On those choils, so not very wide. Your maximum width 1.2 inches. Your closed width right here, you're at 1.3 inches at the widest, so it's still a fairly narrow profile, and that's 34.5 millimeters. Overall length, 7.5 inches, or 19 centimeters. Your stop pin thickness is 118 thousandths, or 3 millimeters. The edge thickness behind the edge, 30 thousandths. Okay, it has a pretty steep edge grind. You can see this primary grind only goes up half the width of the blade, and with 3 millimeter stock, that's going to give you a fairly thick behind the edge. So not a slicer, guys, okay? Especially in this dagger profile, and we'll talk about the other profiles also. And then the weight is 3.7 ounces, or 105 grams. All right. Well, you know what? The cool thing about this knife is there is a huge product range in this knife, and it has a lot to do with a couple of different things. There is 3 or 4 different blade profiles. This is a single ground, single edge dagger style. The back side is a false edge. There is a drop point. There is a clip point. There is a tanto. And then I think there is a recurve tanto. I believe there's a recurve tanto also in the Kalashnikov. On top of the 3 or 4 or 5 different blade styles available, you have multiple handle finishes and blade finishes. Uh, this one's in an OD handle with um, a copper colored blade finish. I'm sorry, guys. And this is a bladehq exclusive, and they call this their Desert Warrior color scheme. And they've got it on a couple other models. I know they have it on the clip point model, and they've probably got it on the Tanto model also. And then there's black handles and gray handles and red handles and orange handles and blue handles and you know, there, I mean, there's even a natural aluminum handle version, and then you can get this copper or black, or they've even got some Damascus blade versions that bladehq has got right now around the $69 price point. That's pretty decent for something with an actual Damascus blade and this decent of a build. And the good thing about these, besides you know, the personalization with the mix of the different blade styles and the colors, they're all $39, guys. And these are bladehq prices. I didn't search everywhere. You may get it for a few dollars less or a few dollars more. But at bladehq, there's like 30 different models of the full size Kalashnikov Auto, and they're all $39.90 or $39.99 or $95 or $39.99, $99.99. I don't remember. But that's a pretty doggone decent deal, guys. This is a hard opening side automatic. It opens just as hard as most very high end autos that I have owned or even tried out. It's a very hard opening, inexpensive automatic knife. Now, materials. Materials is where you see a lot of the cost cutting in this knife. And also, you can, you know, this is made in China. Let's see if it shows made in China. I believe they're made in China or they're made in Taiwan. One or the other. They are Asian origin, manufacturing origin. So you've got a lower cost point there. And then with materials, the handle on this is aluminum like most production automatics, but it is not billet aluminum that is machined to final dimensions. This is cast aluminum. You can see it's got an actual cast-in texture. All of this is cast. The castings are very clean. There's no issues with that, but none of this really is machined as far as I can tell. I think it is pretty much all cast in. All the jimping, all the texturing, all the ridges, everything, guys. I think it is just cast aluminum. And cast aluminum does not have the same strength values that billet aluminum does, because in the casting process you can have weaknesses. But in an automatic knife, that's okay. As long as the final dimensions, the important part around the pivot, is machined correctly and straight, everything is okay in the action on this. So, not a big deal that it is a cast aluminum handle rather than a billet aluminum handle in this lower price point. Now, the next thing that's cost saving is the blade steel. Well, this is in AUS 8, AUS 8. AUS 8 is a Chinese stainless steel. It is a alternative to American 400 series stainless. It gets compared a lot to 440B, but I don't really agree with that comparison, because 440B typically has a higher carbon content and a higher chromium content. AUS 8, typically the carbon content is 0.7 to 0.75%, and the chromium is from 13 to 14.5%. It is a vanadium alloyed steel. The vanadium does aid in hardenability, and vanadium is a carbide adder. I have found AUS 8 to be a fairly toothy alloy of stainless. Not super toothy. It doesn't have a very high vanadium content, but it's a fairly toothy cutter. It's easy to sharpen. It is not going to stay sharp forever. This particular knife with the narrow grinds, thick behind the edge, and you can see what is going to be a very thick edge angle. I have not checked that, but I'm sure it is very thick. Once it loses its initial edge, it's going to be like a butter knife. So I'm going to have to resharpen this, reprofile the edge, thin it out a little bit on the KME, and we'll see what happens. Now, AUS 8 is typically Rockwelled in the 58-59 range for those guys that like to go by Rockwell as far as their blade steel performance goes. So, AUS 8, is it junk steel? Well, no, it's not junk steel. It's a decent, mid-range, entry-level stainless steel. It is easy to resharpen, but it will not hold an edge forever, so you're not going to expect a lot of wear resistance out of it. It's fairly tough, though. I personally have not had any issues with AUS 8 chipping and breaking. I tend to roll an edge on it or deform the edge rather than break anything under hard use. So I don't think there's really any issues with AUS 8 there, at least in my experience. So let's look at that blade. We're going to do some fit and finish here. This is a dagger profile. It is fairly symmetrical from the edge to the back here. And, it is a false edge on the back. It is thin. For anybody that thinks they would want to sharpen that, have at it, because you're going to cut your damn hand. That whole side of the blade is totally exposed when it is closed. So please do not think you're going to sharpen this into an actual two-sided dagger. That would be very dangerous, to say the least. The grinds on this are fairly even. No, they're not perfect. You can see the plunge on that side is slightly off. You can see the plunge on this side is slightly off. And then the edge grind, the edge is ground further back on the back side than it is the show side. And then, of course, there is no sharpening choil, so I'll either have to add a choil or I'm gonna have to fix that, guys. It's pretty ugly sharpening, but it is sharp. It is pointy, and it is, if you sharpen yourself or you have somebody competent to sharpen for you, it is fixable. There's nothing really about this blade that I would say is not acceptable at the price point in the blade steel. Of course, not a whole lot of hard use on this knife being an automatic. I've had good edge retention so far, guys, but it's basically one of those Nito knives you carry and you use lightly. I use automatics lightly anyway, and the reason is the lockup. And I want to show you something on this knife. A button lock automatic, a plunge lock, you have this button right here that as you push it, I don't know if I'm getting that, guys. It goes all the way through, it's spring loaded. All right, the spring pushes the button out. All right, the button on the inside, the shaft, has different diameters, and the way this locks up is the diameter of that plunge bolt locks into this machine sort of half circle, this indent here. That is your locking surface. Look very closely at that, guys. That is your locking surface on this. I can tell you right now, as far as lock strength goes, that is not going to be equal to any very good lock. So don't think this is going to be as strong as a very good frame lock, a compression lock, an axis lock, a triad lock. It is not going to be that strong, guys, in this lower cost auto. Now in higher cost autos, where there's more hand tuning and fine tuning of the lock surface, you could have a larger lock shaft on this plunge lock. You could have a larger lock interface surface then yes, they might be stronger. But keep that in mind on this knife, guys. This particular automatic, not all automatics. Remember, you are paying $39 for this, and I mean, you're getting a lot of knife for that. Don't get me wrong, you're getting a lot of knife for that. And these things that I'm pointing out are nitpicky little things. They are detail-oriented things that can be, in this instance right here with the edge grind, fixed by the user. Not a big deal. In this instance right here with probability of lock strength, just keep that in mind as you're using it. I've not had any problem with it locking up at all, guys. It has a great lockup. It has the most minimal lock movement. Not the most minimal, but it has a minimal amount that I would expect at this price point. Again, any lock play that's in this, I've actually got to put some actual pressure on it to get any play, and then I do get the most minute radial play, just very minute, guys, and that's under more pressure than I would typically put this lock under in this automatic knife. Just keep that in mind, okay? $39 for an automatic knife is not a lot of money, when a decent entry-level automatic is going to be around the $200 price point. So the fit and finish on the blade is decent, except for that edge grind at the back here at the termination. The lockup is solid, except under extreme pressure, and there's just the most minute amount of radial play in that. The fit and finish on the handles, I can't complain about that, guys. The only thing that I will say about this is this finish, this green, is not a hard coat anodizing, and it is not that tough. It is a baked on paint finish. It will scratch up. If you carry your knife in your pocket with keys or anything else that's metal hard like that, it will scratch this finish around the edges and the high points. If you use a knife and you set it down on concrete, anything abrasive like that, you could scratch the paint on the handle. But most people, they really don't care about that at this price point. They get such good performance out of it that it getting scratched up, it just shows it's a little bit of a user knife, and most people are pretty proud of the scratching on theirs. So keep that in mind also, guys. Not a hard coat anodizing. It is a baked on paint. It will scratch if you don't take care of it. You can see mine is pretty pristine. Like I say, I use my automatics fairly lightly, and my knives get carried in a dedicated pocket. I never carry anything else in the pocket that my knife is in. I don't want anything else in the way if I have to immediately and quickly access my knife. Plus, I've got some fairly expensive knives. I don't want anything in my pocket scratching them. So, fit and finish overall on the handle is good. The handle shape is good. The size is good. It's not too big. It is more like carrying a slightly more compact paramilitary 2. And I wish I would have pulled my paramilitary 2 out, because they are very close in length, about 1/8 of an inch on the blade, and very close in the handle also, maybe about 1/4 of an inch in the handle. So that gives you a good idea. And in my medium-sized hands, there's my full grip right there. You can see I've got a little bit here at the butt end. I'm comfortably up here on the jimping, and the jimping is surprisingly pretty decent, guys. You've got the jimping on the handle right here, the cast-in jimping. You've got some machined-in jimping on the blade. The jimping on the blade is very, very good. The jimping on the handle, slightly less grippy. You've got some jimping down here all the way around the butt end if you're going to use this in a reverse grip. Of course, the lanyard that I've got on it is in the way right now, but that's a very good design. No jimping on the inside surface here, but you do have all the finger grooves. Speaking of the finger grooves, Yes, you do have the inherent issues with finger grooving, whether it's on this knife, a different knife, a Glock pistol. Some people's hands are not going to fit it. Those grooves, you can't move them around, guys. So, you know what? For medium to large, small hands, I would say yes. Extra large hands, I would say try to get your hands on one of these before you purchase, because if you're not comfortable with it, the turnover on this to the secondary market, you're going to take a hit on it because it is an import piece from the lower end of the price range when new. So keep that in mind also, guys. If you normally don't like finger grooves, you know what? There's some finger grooves there, so keep that in mind. But the fit and finish, guys, I keep coming back to this. It's $39. At a $39 price point, something like this sort of wanky edge grind might be acceptable, where on a $200 knife it would not be. Something like the very minute lock play under heavy pressure is acceptable here, whereas on a $200 or $300 auto it may not be. The painted cast aluminum handle is acceptable at this price point, where on a $200 or $300 it would not be. You've got a decent lanyard hole right here. You can see I've got one length of paracord that has been decored. I don't even know why I have this on here. I think I just put it on there because there's a piece I had is in OD green. And it's standoff construction, just plain single diameter standoffs. Nothing fancy there. This pocket clip that people seem to love or hate, you know what? It feels like a pocket clip to me. The only thing I will say is the tip right here, I believe, could be a little lower. And I think that I'll bend that tip more flat. You can see that it's got a bend right here, but the bend is not steep enough. It doesn't flatten out enough, and it ramps right up. And of course, that's going to be right in the palm of your hand as you're gripping this. Other than that, this sort of wanky, ribbed sort of look to it, it doesn't line up with anything on the handle, so it's not aesthetic. I do not know how that would help with retention in the pocket. It is a deep carry pocket clip, so kudos for that. It is fairly narrow. You can see the mount here across is fairly narrow, so it is a little squirmy. It's not loose there, guys. It is fully screwed down. It's not loose, but that is just a little squirmy because of the narrowness of this, the narrowness of the mount surface with a single screw there. I've not had any issues with it. It holds in the pocket just fine. And again, I'm not going to hard use this, so this sort of hot spot right here is not a big issue, even though I may go back and fix that. The pocket clip is goofy, but on a $39 knife, again, guys, $39, not $200 or $300, it becomes more and more acceptable when you open the knife. And this is why. I mean, listen to that, guys. This side opening automatic for $39 fires very, very hard. It has got a very stout spring in it, fairly thin 3mm blade stock, so a fairly lightweight blade. It fires. I don't think that you could fire it any harder without running into issues bouncing off of the stop pin and not locking. It just fires perfect for what it is, and that's what you're getting in this knife. You're not getting the absolute best fit and finish, but very good at this price point. You're not getting the absolute best materials, but they're decent at this price point. You're getting a lot of options as far as colors, size, and blade styles, which is great at this price point. So overall, even with the sort of not shortcuts, but how do I want to put this? With the lower price range of materials and finish, even there, guys, I think these are an excellent value at $39. Now, you do have some competition coming onto the market from some other Chinese imports that are starting to do automatics. I'm not going to drop any names here, but I think still, from what I've seen, just the action on this puts it in a league of its own at this price point. Yeah, I think, guys, that's a hard firing side opening automatic. $39, guys. Boker Plus. This is one of those knives that on the inside of the knife enthusiast world, it's fairly highly respected, even though it's a low price point knife. And that pretty much says everything about it. When you find something in the knife world, even with knife enthusiasts, guys that, you know, their collection is $200, $300, $400 knives, they have very few low-end knives, you will find this knife in a lot of their collections, especially if they have specialized their collection into automatics, because it is such good action at such a low price point that it sort of transcends its price point. And for that reason alone, I can recommend this knife. If any of the issues that I've shown you think are acceptable at that price point, if you agree with me on that, if you think that the finger grooved handle would fit your hands, if you're not worried about the finish scratching easily on it and looking used pretty quickly, I think this is a great value, guys, and I recommend it as an entry-level side opening automatic. My only advice is make sure they're legal to carry in your area, because there's nothing about this knife worth getting into legal trouble over. I want to say thank you again for taking the time to watch another video here on Baz on Blades. We're going to talk about blades, and then we might talk about knives. And that's what we're going to do on this channel, guys. God bless all of you, and we will talk to you the next time.